What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today we need to take a look at the first ever Age of Ascension deck that went and won a Vault Tour. Laurerebius of the Pack Leaders Bastion? I'm going to go for that one. Was taken to victory at the Birmingham Vault Tour by the lovely John Pickavants. And I can say lovely, I met him, he was a lovely chap. So I thought we should go and have a good look at his deck. Now, quick heads up, this was a sealed tournament. This was pick 1 out of 3 decks that you were given. It was not a take whatever deck you've had the most success with over the last few months tournament. So that is something we do need to bear in mind here, but that is not to say it's not a great deck, nor is it to say that he is not a phenomenal player. Both of these things are absolutely true. So, the deck then. It's Dis, it's Shadowed, it's Untamed. And when I look at the deck, the first thing that jumps out to me is the ridiculous amount of what I like to term cheeky damage in Shadows. You see, there are 3 copies of Sucker Punch, 2 copies of Throwing Stars, 2 copies of Whistling Darts, and a copy of Nerve Blast in there for good measure. The Shadow Suite has cheeky damage unlike almost any deck I've seen. So to go through them then, Nerve Blast, you steal an Amber, and if you do, you deal 2 damage to a creature. There are a lot of really good 2 damage creatures out there. Think of things like Dusk Witch, for instance, that lets all of your creatures come down ready. Yeah, that's pretty gosh darn good. But all of these things can be taken down by a simple Nerve Blast. They might all have Elusive, all these really good ones, but Elusive doesn't matter when you're talking cheeky damage. We've also got 3 copies of Sucker Punch. Now, Sucker Punch is a weird one because it's got Alpha, which means it's got to be the first thing you do on the doing part of your turn. But you deal 2 damage to an enemy creature, and if you destroy them, you get to archive it. And of course, the deal here is that you want to try and always use it to destroy something, so you can then archive it, and you've always got it there for the beginning of every Shadow's turn. And if you can start every Shadow's turn with an Amber bonus and 2 damage to a creature, that sounds pretty good. Just try and make sure there aren't 3 of these clogging up your hand. Throwing Stars, there's 2 of these. You deal 1 damage to up to 3 creatures, gaining 1 Amber for each creature destroyed this way. It's basically like having a Seeker Needle that you can use 3 times. Please remember that this does not have to be your opponent's creatures, and you gain an Amber for every creature destroyed. Sometimes it's worth taking down your own creatures for the Amber here. And then 2 copies of Whistling Darts gives you an Amber bonus, and you deal 1 damage to each enemy creature. I mean, certainly if you come across Plague Rats, for instance, this will just instantly take out every single Plague Rat, which is kind of funny, because, yeah, it will just wipe them all entirely. So there's a lot of cheeky damage there. But really, Shadows is supposed to be here for stealing. That's the goal here. And we've got decent stealing here. I mean, we've got Brend the Fanatic. Brend the Fanatic, when you play it, you give your opponent an Amber, but when it's destroyed, you steal 3 Amber. Now, it does have Skirmish, so you can't just throw it at one of your opponent's creatures. You've got to have it destroyed properly. But remember, I've just stopped telling you about all the cheeky damage that you can do? Yeah, that's pretty gosh darned awesome here. You've got a lot of options for taking this out. One of the best isn't actually in Shadows. One of the best options we've got here is Unlocked Gateway. It's an Omega card, and it destroys each creature, and then your turn ends. Well, you still get to draw cards, but the doing part of your turn ends. We actually saw John win the Vault Tour in Game 3 of the final by playing down a Brend the Fanatic, using Exhume, because obviously it's not a disc creature, and then using Unlocked Gateway to destroy it, steal 3 Amber, and that was the winning play. And the key thing here to remember is, this was not a one-off thing. I spoke to John after the game. He told me he'd pulled off that exact combo in a number of games during the weekend. It's quite cool. Now, outside of that, in Shadows, we've got Lemindra, which gives your characters Elusive on either side, and you can put it wherever you like. Life for a Life gives you an amber bonus and you sacrifice a creature to deal 6 damage. It's not quite as nice as some of the others because you do have to sacrifice a creature, but remember that Life for a Life can mean that you sacrifice Bren the Fanatic, which is awesome, and then deal 6 damage to a creature. That's pretty gosh darn good. We've got Ronnie Wrist Clocks that steals an amber, but if your opponent's got 7 or more, you steal 2 instead. Now that's actually crucial. If your opponent has exactly 7, this will put them down to 5 and stop them forging. So we don't see as much stealing as we see in some Shadows suites, but we do see a lot of cheeky damage and a decent amount of stealing. It's a really good suite of Shadows cards. Moving into Dis, we've already mentioned a couple, but really the point of Dis is to try and disrupt your opponent, and there's some good cards here. Lash of Broken Dreams, it's got an action, which means keys cost 3 more during your opponent's turn. That's not too bad. We've got Banish that puts an enemy creature into your opponent's archives. Just make sure it's not one of a really good playability, otherwise they can just pick it up at the beginning of their turn and reuse the playability. That would be a very bad thing. We've got Dust Imp. When it's destroyed, you gain 2 Ember. Remember all the ridiculous options we've got for destroying your own creature. Like, for instance, Life for a Life, which will destroy your own creature. Or Throwing Stars, which will only do half as much as you need, but will still do it quite nicely. Quick side note here, do remember that Whistling Darts is only enemy creature, as is Sucker Punch. But you've got some ways to damage your own here as well. Now, we mentioned Exhume. Exhume is wonderful here because you get to take a creature out of your discard pile and just play it, even if it's not a dis creature. And Bren the Fanatic is maybe the best option here. I think most of the time it is. You do have Fuzzy Gruen, which is quite nice. 2 Amber and you give your opponent 1. It's good to Amber Rush, but mostly you're probably going Bren the Fanatic here. Misery Exploit gains you 1 amber for each damaged enemy creature, and when you've got stuff like 2 Whistling Darts, 3 Throwing Stars, Sucker Punch, etc., yeah, frankly, ladies and gentlemen, you will often have a lot of damaged enemy creatures, and then playing something like Misery Exploit can actually gain you a lot of amber. This is one of the best decks I've ever seen for this particular card. Not finished with you shuffles any number of creatures from your discard pile into your deck. Nice for getting Brend back a little bit faster. Though do remember that if you use Not Finished with You to get it out the discard, it won't then be in the discard to use Exhume, so that is something to watch. Yerk lets you discard a card from your hand. Might be nice for filling your hand to draw more at the end of your turn. Life Word. It's an artifact that gives you an amber bonus. Your opponent cannot play creatures during their next turn. And like I've said, you're disrupting your opponent. What this deck is really good at is taking out your opponent's creatures. So if you're taking out their creatures and then using this to stop them playing new creatures, you can probably see how that might add up quite quickly. Pandemonium. Each undamaged creature captures 1 amber from its opponent. It's fine. Not the best in a deck of cheeky damage, but it's not terrible. Free Fates destroys the 3 most powerful creatures. And frankly, ladies and gentlemen, well, come on. You know this. You know this, ladies and gentlemen. We've got so many options for getting rid of creatures. This is just one more. And if you can make Bren the Fanatic one of the most powerful creatures remaining, putting it out there. And then Tolus. Each time a creature is destroyed, its opponent gains an amber. This is a double-edged sword. It is phenomenal if you're taking out your opponent's creatures. I mean, imagine if you can get this on the board and then next turn start taking out 7 Plague Rats using Whistling Darts. That would be amazing. But generally speaking, this can backfire. And now in terms of Untamed, Untamed is fine here. It doesn't strike me as the best house, but it's got some nice creatures. It's got some good stuff. The 2 cards I really love in here are 2 copies of Mimicry that lets you just copy any action in your opponent's discard pile. Whatever they've got, you can use. Having 2 Mimicry is absolutely wonderful. You don't have great You Shall Not Reap cards like Doorstep to Heaven, but with Mimicry, all of a sudden you might. And that's pretty awesome. We've got a couple of Fang House. Assault free and hazardous free makes it difficult to get off the field. Couple of knocks, as long as it's got 2 neighbours, it's a 9 power creature, that's pretty sweet. Persistence Hunting gives you an amber and lets you exhaust each enemy creature of a particular house, that could be fun. Camouflage gives you an amber and means that you can only be fought by flank creatures. If you drop that at the right time, your opponent might be in a lot of trouble because they just can't take out the creature. Fogbank stops your opponent using enemy creatures to fight on their next turn. Goes really nicely with your whole, you can't do anything with your creatures. I mean, that, along with something like Life would, there are going to be multiple turns your opponent cannot do what they want. Then you add in Persistence Hunting, and there's a lot to love. We then see Fuzzy Gruen gives you 2 amber and your opponent 1. World Tree, which returns a creature from your discard pile to the top of your deck as an action. Again, really good for reusing stuff like Fuzzy Gruen, Bren the Fanatic, etc. And finally, Soldiers to Flowers. Gives you an amber bonus, and you purge each untamed creature from each player's discard pile, and everybody gains 1 amber for each creature they purge. Could be very awkward if your opponent's also playing Untamed, but what we saw some players doing over the weekend, certainly Finn, his opponent in the final, had done this over the weekend, is just discarding your Untamed creatures to use this as a really big, look how much amber I'm getting in one go. Having said that, 2 Fanghouse, 2 Nox, and a Fuzzy Gruen, there are good reasons to play and use these creatures. So there we go, this is a really good deck. You've got loads of cheeky damage, loads of stealing, loads of getting rid of your opponent's creatures. It's not the fastest deck ever at generating amber, but you've got some tricks there like Misery Exploit, Soldiers to Flowers, etc., which can do some good. And then, even if you've just got a few Untamed creatures down on a Reaping, there are ways to get the amber here. I love this deck, and I think John made an excellent choice using it, and I think he played phenomenally well all weekend. That's pretty gosh darn sweet. So there we go. I think this is great, but I want to know what you think about it. So let me know in the comment section. Go nuts, be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at @Wossy, where we talk about Keyforge and a whole bunch of other games. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.